Oh, hello, and welcome to Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist, and tonight we have some special guests.
Yes, hello. I'm Matt from The Drunk and the Ugly.
Hi, I'm Sam, also from The Drunk and the Ugly.
We're here today to talk to you about, have you heard the word of Jesus Christ?
Yep, and his horrific angels.
Yes.
Yes, we have special guests tonight for our special episode where we decide to discuss the Ichor Falls stories.
Woo!
Well, some of them.
Yeah, some of them. We'll be doing Lemon Blossom Girl, the Opossum Society, Curious Little Things, and the Fulcrum. And for those of you just tuning in for the first time, Ichor Falls is kind of creepypasta, which is a series of scary campfire stories that are on the internet that get copied and pasted across the internet, and so the term for them got turned into copypasta, and the creepy ones are creepypasta. So let's start with our guests for the stories. So which one of you guys wants to do yours first?
Matt, which one are you doing? You're doing Lemon
I'm
Blossom?
doing Curious Little Thing.
Curious Little Thing. Start with Curious Little Thing, because Curious Little Thing is kind of, aside from Candle Cove, Curious Little Thing is one of the defining stories of Ichor Falls. So
Yeah.
give it a go.
All right, yeah. So, I mean, just to break it down in the broadest strokes, Curious Little Thing follows. We don't really get any information on who the main character is. But it follows a guy who stays at a hotel in the 1930s called the Hotel Umbra, who talks about his stay there, and more peculiarly, a little girl that he keeps seeing just before he closes any doors, or just as he opens any doors. He's informed that this little girl is the attendant at the hotel says, "That's our Maddie, and she's sweet on you. She does it to everybody." And everybody just kind of treats it like it's a regular thing there. But the guy says that it freaked him out. He tried to he was supposed to stay in the hotel for 4 days. He ended up spending the last night in his car trying to avoid it eventually. And then after he leaves the town, he keeps seeing Maddie whenever he closes any door. He eventually develops a sort of fear of opening or closing doors, to the point where now he doesn't open his eyes in a room until he's closed every door and window, and thinks he's rid himself of it, up until the final line in the story where he says, "I was getting ready for bed a few nights ago, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, door shut, cabinet shut, watching myself floss. I opened up wide to get my molars, and I swear I saw her fingertips retreat down the back of my throat."
Yep, that still gives me spine chilling.
The one that makes me kind of freak a little bit is when she is upside down at the top of his windshield, as if on the roof, darting away from his view. Like, that one's...
Yeah, she's just always... she's just always kind of out of sight.
Yeah. Not... Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, just always in the corner of your eye, kind of... Yeah. Just kind of a... Always trying... And she's always trying to, like run at it, isn't she? Or she's trying to, get into the view?
She rushes at gaps. And...
Yeah.
Whenever...
So when you're closing a door, you'll see her, start running towards the door just before it closes.
Yeah.
I think the first encounter the character has is he's in an elevator, and as the door is just about to close, he sees someone, tries to push the door open button to let them in, and then she's not there anymore when the door opens again.
Yeah, and then there's a great paragraph where the first time I sat at that writing table, I saw her as I closed the large bottom drawer. She rushed at the gap from inside the drawer, her wide eyes pleading for something I could not give. Like, just that...
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing.
So Matt, do you want to talk about this? Because I will just start ranting and raving about how great this story is, but I want you to get yours in first before I dominate the conversation here.
So I think honestly we're probably going to talk about the same thing because the main reason I ended up picking this story, the main reason I ended up picking this story was just because like I read through it and then I'm like, this seems really familiar, and then I remembered another work of Chris Straub called Brood Hollow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah. And even the first book of Brood Hollow is called A Curious Little Thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also one of the first things that guy, the character, actually encounters or they address in Brood Hollow.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing in Brood Hollow the character has is he has this unnatural fear of closing doors.
Yeah.
And that's before he encounters Maddie in that setting.
But yeah, talk about this in the context of Ichor Falls.
Yeah,
and,
of
Brood
Ichor
Hollow.
Falls.
Yeah. We'll
get
Brood
there.
Hollow's another thing.
We'll get there.
Brood Hollow will happen eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it feels like it's definitely like, I don't know, when I was reading it, it sounded very much like a standard ghost story that you'd hear from a haunting in real life kind of thing to me. I don't know.
Yeah. That's
Like just that like kind of like actually like if you watch like any of those ghost adventure shows or whatever, they usually they'll be at a creepy manor or some kind of hotel. And they're like that kind of story exists in all, like a bunch of those kind of like hotel hauntings.
That's
it's the sort of I mean it's the standard kind of haunting story because it's the it's the ghost that you see out of the corner of your eye. It's the thing that you see when you want to see a ghost. Like you just misinterpret something. You just misinterpret something as a ghost. In this case, it's actually a real thing. And the second thing that's interesting about this is the hotel attendant who just says like, "Oh yeah, she's been here for a long time. She likes her gentleman guests. Just been shy."
That alone's kind of creepy.
I
don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really effective parts of this story is just from its basic construction. And that's one of the things the Ichor Falls stories all do is they are excellent bits of microfiction before they are creepypasta. Creepypasta is not generally written well or structured well from a basic story writing standpoint, but Curious Little Thing, the first encounter with Maddie, I mean, the Curious Little Thing is 1, 2, 3.5, 4.5 pages, and the first encounter with Maddie takes up a page and a half. Like, it is, that first elevator door encounter is the starting point of the story. I mean, it is the thing that you are immediately scared of. And it's presented innocuously enough that you know something is wrong and that that this will be the crux of the story, but you haven't hit the turn of the story into where it's horrific yet.
Yeah, it escalates pretty well.
Before she becomes Little Miss Stalker.
Right, exactly. And that turn is really effective because the turn of the story, the point from which it becomes just, this is a thing that was occurring to me, into here is the inevitability of the horror, is that hotel attendant. It's the guy just saying, yeah, it happens, but she's sweet on you now, and she just wants to see. And then from there it becomes, you get single paragraph indications of each encounter. I mean, you've got the door to the bathroom, the closet door, the writing table, the car, and then, a bit more description, and then the very last line of the most horrific one of the fingertips retreating down the back of the throat.
Well, and I think the other thing that's interesting about it is that it escalates not by becoming more horrific, but like the attendant basically sets some rules that Maddie follows, and over the course of the story, like he says that she takes an interest in gentlemen that stay at the hotel, and you'll see her as you close doors, and she keeps kind of like warping that slowly, that it's implied to us that she only stays in the hotel, which is why the guy stays in his car, but then he finds that no, she'll keep coming after you even if you're in your car, and then he starts closing his eyes when he closes doors, but then he finds out that no, she'll go towards any small gap, she'll follow you everywhere, and like it's this sort of like it's this sort of horror thing where she kind of follows a rule but then continues to bend it to just like keep it going.
Yeah, like to make it like a little bit more surreal, like as it goes on. Like at first it's just normal. Like, she's just like, could be anybody trying to get to a door, and just at that creak, or at that crack. And then starts doing things like appearing inside of a drawer
Yeah.
as it's about to close, or like even more sinister. Like, and then like you said, like he tried to like just sleep in his car, and she just peeks out over the windshield, which is just kind of unnerving thinking about that. And then the final one, which is she's starting to just come out of like every little space that he sees.
The other really impressive thing about this story that it does without you realizing it is it actually presents the horror as something that the main character has gotten used to and allows you to experience because it starts with him essentially describing this as an odd habit in that he enters a room, shuts the door, turns his face away from it until he hears the lock click, and only then does he open his eyes. Like, and he says, like, it's been a year since he's been back from the hotel. Like, Maddie keeps coming back to him. So this is essentially something he's gotten used to. But Maddie is insistent, and I think that's the scary part of it. Is it's a ghost that follows a certain set of rules that then starts warping those rules in a way that she needs to. Like, she is an insistent thing and trying to get his attention. I think that's the scariest part of it, is that it's a ghost that has agency.
Yeah, like it's like he can ignore it all he likes. She's just going to keep trying to find ways to break him.
Yeah, and it's not even certain that she's breaking him or even trying to drive him insane.
Yeah, we don't know. I think that's the other kind of scary part of it, is that we don't know what Maddie's motivation is or what her intentions are. We just know that she does this thing.
Yeah, and she is building to a more frantic or intrusive or invasive point, and that's in creepypasta fashion. Like, it doesn't give us an answer, it doesn't give us a final climax of sorting out the actual story of Maddie. It just is, here is what she is doing and here's why it's getting worse, and that's effective. It's very effective.
Yeah. Dr. Leviathan, would you like anything to keep up? No? Okay.
Tim Hortons is still getting going in him.
Yeah, no, it's not sure what else I had to say about that.
I will say that of all of the Ichor Falls stories, I obviously read Candle Cove first because, and that's mostly just a factor of the way that I found Candle Cove as like it was something that got linked to me via an internet forum or something along the lines. Like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I found Candle Cove first and then started reading the rest of the Ichor Falls stories. But Curious Little Thing was the first Ichor Falls story I read of the cycle that are the actual Ichor Falls stories, the ones in the book. Because Candle Cove is very much not those. Like, Candle Cove is very different and was not...
Yeah, it's... Yeah. I think they do hint at something like Ashland, which is apparently near Ichor Falls, but that's really the only connecting factor. There's nothing... Like, it doesn't tie it to Ichor Falls itself.
Right, and almost all of the other books, or other stories in the book, I think all of them, actually... Well, no, there's a couple that don't. But they're almost all presented as first person or as somebody telling you a story, of the of a legend, or there's descriptions of things, but most of them are presented from the perspective of an actual character, whereas Candle Cove is very much not. But A Curious Little Thing is, and that really sets the stage for a lot of the ways that the rest of the Ichor Falls stories are told.
Yeah.
And it's also the first actual story in the book, which is worth noting, because you have 5 or 10 pages of introduction to the setting in the book, which sort of functions as its own story and its own bit of creepypasta in general, just because it's this this description of this crazy town.
It's kind of like found film or found footage, but in novel form.
Yeah, found history book.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's some of the stories. I mean, they aren't like, there is a narrative to it, but it's like sometimes they seem incomplete, or they're not conventional story telling method. But yeah, it's very like Matt said, it's very much like a found footage style of writing.
Yeah, and a curious little thing really just hammers home the idea of the agency of this place that that Chris very much wants to get across. It's cool. It's a really good story.
Yeah, I think for the most part we're fans of this freaking series of books.
Do we want to move on?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we've said all we can about this 3.5-page story.
Yeah.
We've managed to talk about it for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Do we want to go in book order or just bounce around? Because next is Lemon Blossom Girl, if that's what we want to...
Yeah, I can do Lemon Blossom Girl. I actually have notes for that one, so...
Let's talk about that one.
All right, so for Lemon Blossom Girl, the rundown, it's this kid, when he's 6... he goes to a museum with his dad and sees a crouched bog mummy, or one of those bog bodies, and it's named the Lemon Blossom Girl, and it just kind of freaks him out because it's just misshapen and leathery and grotesque. And then that night he begins having nightmares of the mummy in his house, and he can't move, but he knows it's there in typical dream logic. And then he has those nightmares for a while, but eventually they go away. And then it fast forwards to when he's 12, and he moves to the West Coast, moves to the East Coast to like Boston area, and attends a nice school, and they have a lot of field trips. So on one of the field trips, they go to a museum, and he encounters the Lemon Blossom Girl again in a separate exhibit. And shortly thereafter, or he finds a little bit more out about her, like they describe a little bit more about her history and stuff, about how she was from South America and whatnot. And then he starts having the nightmares again. However, this time he knows that she was actually pregnant when she died, so now he's having nightmares of her holding this mummified baby. I can't remember if is she shuffling at this point, or is she still standing around in his house?
Yeah, she shambles slowly, carrying her infant in her arms, its skin a cross between leather and paper, stretched tightly across blackened bones. Yeah.
Ugh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and she's starting to become mobile now in the dreams. But eventually the nightmares do pass, and middle school and high school go by. It's like barely. It's just skimmed. And now he's in college, and he finds he put what's the words? Letters out to different universities and colleges. Nothing comes back, so he tries one in West Virginia, and lo and behold, he gets one in this backwater campus, and they happen to have and on one day he's walking back to his dorm, and he goes by the cultural center, and it's next to his dorm, so he figures he'll go check that out. And then he sees it again, the Lemon Blossom Girl, and it's the same one. And then he starts just kind of breaking a little bit. He starts thinking that this thing has always been an exhibit. It has never been. It didn't have an origin. It's just always been on display, and it's always been staring back at him in those dead eye holes. And so he freaks out a little bit, goes back to his dorm, and learns a little bit more about the thing, but then leaves the culture center. And then for the last 6 nights, he's been having nightmares of the mummy and her child in hand, shuffling ever closer to him, thinking dark thoughts at him as he is helpless in his bed. It just seems to be getting closer and closer every time. And then the last bit of the story tells that he's grabbed a can of gasoline and some matches and is presumably going to burn the mummy to try and stop it from its dream advances and the stalking horror that it's kind of been emanating for him for most of his life, or most of his young life.
Yeah.
And that's where the story ends.
One of the very interesting parts of the story that I think is also worth noting is when he sees the Lemon Blossom Girl at the cultural center at his college, right before the final set of nightmares, he sees a button with loud block letters saying "Start," and he has sort of a mental breakdown imagining what start means if you push that button on her
Start
exhibit.
moving, start breathing. Yeah.
Start scratching at the glass. Yeah, no, that's...
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really liked the story, just because, like, it did have, like, there was a bit of, like, a sense of, like, of stalking history, like, to this thing. Like, it was, the guy, like, started at 6, and it's been, like, kind of, like, following him kind of over the course of his childhood. And it's almost been, like, it's just, like, a slow horror where it's just been affecting him in certain key points of his life. And just, like, mummies in general kind of, or, like, those, like, mummified bodies or, like, bog bodies tend to, like, be really effective because of how grotesque they are. And how, like, it's almost like an uncanny valley of, like, the thing that should be decomposed, but it's skeleton, like a skeleton, but yet it still has skin and flesh after so many, like, centuries of being dead.
Well, and that's the really effective part of this story, is that she, in each encounter with the Lemon Blossom Girl in the exhibit, she is described as being less and less human. And I think that's the real horror that is at the core of this, is the understanding of something as a dead thing that is no longer human. I think that's what's the really scary part of this. You know, not even... Say again?
Sorry, sorry, was it actually, like, is it a girl that's narrating, or?
No, well, it's not given, although I think,
Yeah, most of these stories,
are very ambiguous for their narrators.
Yeah.
Let me read through. Keep talking, and I'll read through and see if I can find any evidence.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's,
Yeah, I mean, it's... So one of the other things that's interesting is that the and I guess this also follows with the previous thing, that the more that the narrator sees the Lemon Blossom Girl as this dead thing that has always been dead and always been on display, the more, like, elaborate the nightmares become.
Yeah, like, his like, mental stability is starting to break down a little bit.
Well, and that's the very interesting part of this story, is because it's presented on a couple of different axes. Because you have the horror of, or the implied horror, I suppose, of this strange thing following you throughout your entire life. But there's also the very real terror of the narrator's nightmares. I mean, each nightmare is pretty horrific. Like, the first nightmare is that the Lemon Blossom Girl exists in the house that the narrator lives in, you know, and that she's waiting, and this is a great line, thinking bad thoughts with that smooth yellowing head of hers, thinking of me. Lemon Blossom Girl doesn't have a whole lot of antagonistic aspect to it, except along the lines of, there is this thing that wants to have something to do with me, and it keeps trying to have something to do with me. And it's, again, an insistent horror. It's something that shows up and gets closer every time, just like Maddie does. Yeah, in Curious Little Thing.
And
it also seems to be...
and I guess the narrator implies that they understand her... They understand her motivations, but that could just be a projection.
Well, and
it's this sort of she can follow me to any museum display, but she needs my dreams to come closer to hold her young.
Exactly, and that is the kind of scary part of this, is it's not a story of an actual haunting. It can be read that way, and it can also be read as just somebody who's having a schizophrenic breakdown.
Like, that's one of the things I noticed, that is, it seems to be like a self-imposed traumatization, or like a self-imposed horror.
Absolutely.
Because the entity itself actually may not even be supernatural or anything. It's just all in his head.
Yeah, he could just be the most unlucky person in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It could just be that this thing just happens to be wherever he is, or wherever she is. And this is a really interesting key point, I think, of the story, is the second time after they encounter the Lemon Blossom Girl in the nightmare, when she isn't curled up in a ball anymore and is walking, carrying her infant, the line is, "I knew these things, was made to know these things by the dream, but again never laid eyes on her." And I think that's the key point, is that the narrator is forced to know these things. There is an element of nightmare here that is their brain or some supernatural entity, and perhaps it doesn't even matter that the difference, that is forcing them to have knowledge of something that should not exist. And I think that is, each of these stories kind of gets at something that is, I think, very scary to Chris Straub, and I think that's the primary reason he wrote these, is because he's exercising some sort of horror that, or idea of a horrific thing. And I think that sense of dream knowing, that you can be in this situation in a dream and know these things that you are not supposed to, is the actual point of this story. And I think it doesn't matter whether or not it's actually a supernatural entity that's really imposing dreams or trying to get closer or actually trying to, kill the narrator. It's that that this person is being forced to know something that they shouldn't. And I think that's really effective.
I know that it does sound like a lot of these are actually it's just Chris Straub trying to I think actually I even remember looking at checking out a video of him saying that a lot of the Ichor Falls stuff were stories that he wrote based off of little fears that he had, or little just really creepy things that he found very creepy.
And I think the strength of this story is that it is not, it is not definitively stated one way or the other what's going on. And I think that if it was just this monster that was using the dreams to come and get closer, it would be less scary. It wouldn't. Well,
it would give it some inherent structure. It would
exactly.
It's the unknowableness, or the ineffability, I guess, is the better word, that is what makes it.
The other really interesting thing is that this story stands almost entirely on its adjectives. The descriptions of the Lemon Blossom Girl are intricate and much more than should actually be given to a mummy. We have splintered wood sliding against burlap and wet paper, something thick like parchment and faintly clothes, a sickening, thick, spicy sweetness. The number of ways that this thing is described, it gives tangibility to it. It creates this, it assaults your senses with its sickly sweetness, and that's fucking horrific. Sorry for swearing.
also to break from the literary descriptions. I'm just gonna say the one thing, and I don't know why this is. For some reason, every time there's a description of the Lemon Blossom Girl, I think of chicken wings.
What?
I think it's because
I actually think I get it. But describe it, and I'll tell you why I think you get it.
So some of it is for reasons that make sense, but some of it is also just because it's called Lemon Blossom Girl, and I think I had some lemon garlic chicken wings at some point around there. Yeah. And so there's also the description of very thin skin on top of visible bone and all that other kind of stuff, and also the description of a sickly sweetness emanating from it.
Yeah, it's that sense of desiccated skin, of dried out things covering solid things. That is, I see where you get chicken wings from that. It's very.
That's so much more disturbing now.
Another kind of random thing that I really appreciate about this story is, if you have the book, every story has a little pen sketch after it of some specific item that has to do with the story. Like after Candle Cove, there's a sketch of a sailing ship. After one of the stories, there's a pickaxe. After one, there's a bird on a branch, that sort of thing. After this one is a sketch of a baby in a basket, which is just
final nail in the coffin there, just way
to drive that one home.
Also, about kind of regarding one detail about it is so the guy goes to a West Virginia college, and we're assuming that that's a college that's near Ichor Falls, though it's never really mentioned.
Right, and I think that Ichor Falls is canonically in West Virginia, like it has a location.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting aspect of this is that it doesn't relate to Ichor Falls directly as part of a mythos, or it's not like there's no these aren't in the the Miskatonic University.
Yeah, like this isn't like it's not like Lovecraft stuff where it was Innsmouth or Dunwich or what's Arkham. There we go. Arkham.
Yeah.
Is his like main staple.
Although I do think that it is supposed to be, it is implied that the original encounter is in Ichor Falls, because the first lines are, "My father used to take me to the Natural History and Science Museum downtown when I was 6. So contextually, I think we can infer that it is originally located in Ichor Falls. But that's the other effective part of the story, is that the first encounter has no actual location given. It's just downtown.
Yeah. Well, actually, it does reference that he was when he was 6, I think he was actually on the West Coast, and then he moved to the East Coast to Boston, and then he went to the middle, to West Virginia. So I don't think it's actually. I don't think. I always maybe it's just me assuming that, but
it doesn't specifically say. It says he used to take me to the Natural History and Science Museum downtown, and then the next physical location given is moving to the East Coast. So it could start in West Virginia, and and I think when you set it in this book next to all the other Ichor Falls stories, you absolutely can read it as, okay, well, this starts in Ichor Falls and goes somewhere else, but it doesn't have to. Like, you could just take this story for itself, and then it ends up in this sort of tangential location to Ichor Falls, that if you didn't know anything about the Ichor Falls story, if you didn't know anything about the Ichor Falls setting, it's just, okay, well, you end up in West Virginia, but that just means she just followed you there. That's
exactly,
where she ends up.
Yeah.
The ways that Lemon Blossom Girl is referred to is very interesting as the story progresses. You have the Lemon Blossom Girl in the first encounter, and then the Lemon Blossom Girl in the second encounter, and then it starts referring to her as just she for a long time, and then she's described as just being Lemon Blossom Girl, not a Lemon Blossom Girl, not the Lemon Blossom Girl, just Lemon Blossom Girl as an existence.
As a name.
Yeah. And then at the very end is my Lemon Blossom Girl.
Yeah, exactly.
The possessive quality of this haunting is just ugh.
He's just almost completely embraced the fact that this horror that has been stalking him and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, Lemon Blossom Girl. It's a good story.
Yeah.
I think it also is one of the few stories where we have the narrator or the subject of the haunting being able to or attempting to do something about the haunting. Like,
well, this is one of the rare cases where, like, the monster, as we can refer to it, has a weakness, and its weakness is that it's an inanimate object.
Yeah, that's true.
It can't go anywhere aside from in your dreams, but if you're awake, you have control. You have some agency to stop it by burning it, by taking a gasoline tank to it.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the things that of note was the story. Like, I mean, there's nothing really like antagonistic, or like there's something antagonistic, but it's not like very like what's the word? Like not active. Like it's very the entity or the presence is hostile toward him for most of the story, but nothing really actually happens to him.
Well, I mean, it's a perception of hostility. There's the Lemon Blossom Girl's always there, but I mean, never like everything that we get, and I mean, honestly, I guess it's just because it's first person, but like it's just a projection. Like all we know is that it's there. But again, I guess like Sam said, like that doesn't really matter, like because to this guy, because of his projections, this is it's this terrible, horrific thing that just wants and needs him to keep living.
Yeah. But no, what I meant was so we actually kind of gets to the good part and then doesn't proceed forward when he goes to burn it alive or goes to burn it. Like it just kind of stops right there.
Yeah.
It's like
because I mean I think at that point of the story we have what creepypastas and good ghost stories aim for is a setup whereupon the only thing remaining is to either succeed against the horror and thus end the horror, or be completely overcome by the horror. And the aim of creepypastas is not to give you a resolution. And so it's because paying one last visit to the Lemon Blossom Girl will result in either the Lemon Blossom Girl being burned and the haunting being over, or the Lemon Blossom Girl being burned and having nothing happen to stop it. And
yeah, exactly. Like it's still just no matter what happens, like he could burn it to like complete ashes, and then the next night it's still following. It's still stalking him. He's still screwed.
And I think it's this thing in general that the one thing I have said is that good horror is like bad sex, in that it just builds tension and then it just leaves you there.
Wow.
Some people
Nice.
would argue
that's the thing,
that's
like
quite good sex, but I will not say anything more.
So the important thing about this, and I think about a lot of them, is that there's no resolution, because that would make that would lead to a tension release. That if there's even if the resolution of the story was I destroyed it and I still see her, there's still closure.
Yeah, exactly. There is a final point at which you can have some catharsis about how the story resolves. Also, this one is especially effective because not only does it leave us on that cliffhanger, it leaves us on the cliffhanger wherein the narrator takes their first actual action against the Lemon Blossom Girl, and so you don't even get to know how that resolves, which I think is just this perfect little cherry on top of the blue ballsing of a creepypasta. Like that there is something that maybe can be done, but you don't even get to know if they even get to do it.
Yeah. That's what another thing I've noticed over time with reading creepypastas is that they give you kind of an we're all GMs for like role playing games and stuff too. Mm-hmm. So reading these tend to be like really good for like game fodder.
Yep.
Just as an aside from creepypasta,
well, I think that's less to the way that I mean I guess it's somewhat to the way that they're constructed, because they're super vague, and so there's a lot of cracks that you can fill in.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, even this book, it's been noted that we were going over it, and a lot of the stories could easily be used as either, if not accounts that follow or that precede a game or like a scenario, or could be just straight up artifacts for a scenario to start.
Absolutely.
Like probably our next one.
Yeah, like our next one, which I guess I can start talking about.
End of part 1 for the Ichor Falls stories. Tune in next episode for the conclusion.